Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Well, I am thrilled to be here with you. Apologies, I am not with you in person, but I am super excited to talk about accessibility, why it's important, how you can leverage some of the accessibility features built right into the M365 products that you use every day. But we'll also talk about building accessible content because, as we just mentioned, it's very important for you as an organization to build accessible content for your colleagues and your constituents. At Microsoft, we believe our mission statement is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And by every person, we mean every person, regardless of ability. And so I think it's important to start with level setting who the disability community is because we often don't recognize the breadth of the community. There are 1.3 billion people in the world who have a disability, and 75% of those disabilities are non-apparent or invisible. And I'll use myself as an example. I had a spinal cord injury 10 years ago and became a quadriplegic. I have some arm function, I don't have any hand function at all, and I use a wheelchair. So I have a visible, permanent disability. But if you think about someone who is neurodivergent, someone who has low vision, someone who is hard of hearing and uses very small hearing aids that you can't see, those are non-apparent or invisible disabilities. And 83% of us will experience a disability at some point in our life. It may be a temporary disability where you've sprained your wrist and you need to use speech to text technology for a period of time. If we're lucky enough, we might age into disability where as we get older, we experience a reduction in hearing or a reduction in vision. As my colleague Dave Dame says, we're all going to be disabled at some point. It's just some of us beat you to it. So when we think about accessibility, we're really building tools for all of us. And 1 in 5 people identify as neurodivergent. And if you think about the younger generations, that number goes up significantly. So this is our current workforce, and this is our future workforce. So we're going to start off with some of the productivity tools that are available throughout the M365 products that you can use today. And this is not a comprehensive list, but I like to give you an idea of what's available and then welcome you to go learn and explore more and find the tools that will work best for you. And often what we find when we have these conversations is that people find tools that they can use not necessarily related to a disability, but just because it improves their productivity. So we're going to start off in Windows. And we've got this really great way to get to your accessibility menu quickly. Think about Windows plus U. So if you click on the Windows key and U, that gets you right into your accessibility settings, where you can adjust things like your text size. You can make it larger across all of your applications that you're working in. You can increase your mouse pointer size and change the color. I have set mine to be larger and pink. It makes it easier for me to see. It makes it easier for others to see when I'm doing demos. We have a screen reader built right into our operating system. Many people who are blind or have low vision will leverage a third-party screen reader, which are fantastic tools like JAWS or NVDA. But we do have one built right in. And recently, we've added natural sounding voices into Narrator. So if you've ever heard a screen reader, it sounds very mechanical, but now you can select from a more natural sounding voice. Magnifier is a great way to zoom in on your screen. You can click Windows key and plus sign, and that's going to zoom you in to your screen. And Windows escape key gets you right out. Contrast themes are a great way to apply a more muted color palette across all of your applications. So think of grayscale. But the great thing about contrast themes is you can customize the colors to select the colors that work best for you. Color filters is another great way to change the color palette on your laptop. It was originally created for people who have color blindness. So you can go into color features, select your specific type of color blindness, and it will apply the appropriate color palette. But we've also added things like grayscale into color filters recently. Voice access is a tool that I use all day, every day to support my specific type of disability. So voice access enables me to navigate my laptop. I can open applications, close them, toggle through them, and I can convert speech to text using just my voice. Focus mode is something we introduced in Windows 11. It's a great feature that I should probably use more often, but it enables me to go into basically a do not disturb mode, and it will mute all of those disruptions and pop-ups that we all get all day, every day. And if you have a Spotify account, you can link your Spotify playlist to your focus mode. And when you go into focus mode, it's going to automatically start playing your Spotify playlist. Moving over into our applications, I'll start with PowerPoint because we've got a couple of really great features here that I find many people aren't aware of. And I'll start with Designer. Designer was originally created for people with mobility disabilities, but it's a great way to make professional looking PowerPoint slides without spending a lot of time on the actual design. So when you select Designer, it's going to leverage AI to consume your content and recommend designs that you can apply to your slides. And as you continue adding content into your slides, it's continuing to consume that content to refine the design to better align with your content. So it gives all of us the opportunity to focus on building robust content rather than making our slides look pretty. And I think this is a great example of when we build with the disability community, everyone benefits. Rehearse with Coach is another great hidden feature. If you experience anxiety when you're going into a presentation, you can go into Rehearse with Coach. It will put you into presentation mode. You can start practicing your slides, and it's going to give you real-time feedback. Things like you're speaking too quickly, you're using filler words, you're reading your slides. And then at the end, it gives you a comprehensive report. So it's just a great way to get comfortable with presenting. And then throughout many of our applications, we've got features like Dictate, which enables you to convert speech to text very quickly and on the fly by just selecting the Dictate icon in your home ribbon. And that's available in, again, several of our applications like PowerPoint, Outlook, and Word. And it was, again, created for people with mobility disabilities, but we've heard from the neurodivergent community that they appreciate Dictate because sometimes it's just easier to say what you're trying to get down on paper rather than typing it out. Read aloud is another feature that we have throughout applications, and it's not as comprehensive as a screen reader, but it will read out content to you. So it will read out text in an email, text in a Word document. And this is one that I'll use if I'm trying to read a long, complex document at the end of a day, just to help with my reading comprehension. Immersive Reader, another feature we have throughout our products, was originally designed for people who have dyslexia. And it does several different things, including giving you the ability to divide a word by syllable, spread out words on a page, narrow the column width, highlight 1, 3, or 5 rows at a time. So it will highlight each row as you're scrolling down and reading. And you can also put a muted color palette behind the text, which again helps with reading comprehension. And then moving over into Excel, we've got some great new features that we've released recently. One is dark mode. As my eyes get older, I prefer dark mode because it makes it easier for me to look at my screen for hours a day. And now we've introduced it in Excel. Focus cell is a great feature which will highlight the column and the row that you're on, so it makes it easier to know which cell you have focus on. And then we've also added some translation features into Excel, where it will translate language and even detect the language being used in the spreadsheet. Moving over into Teams, we've added some really great features over the past couple of years, and we have some very exciting features coming out soon. And I like to tell some of the product stories behind these features. So at Microsoft, we have accessibility architects on every single one of our product teams, many of whom have a lived experience, because we think it's important to build, again, with the disability community. We don't make assumptions about what people need. We ask them. And this is a great example. We've got an accessibility architect on our Teams team who is deaf, and he uses a sign language interpreter. He would join a Teams call, and there are 80 people on the call. Everyone has their cameras on. And so he's paging through, trying to find his interpreter to pin her. And now he's missed the first couple of minutes of the meeting. So now what he can do is he can designate his sign language interpreter in his Teams settings. So she's automatically pinned in a larger, high resolution window in the same spot on his screen every time. So he doesn't have to go through that exercise of finding her in the crowd. Custom backgrounds is another great example. I use blur background on every presentation. And I think many of us did during the pandemic because we didn't want people to see how messy our home offices were behind us and all our kids and dogs and cats running around our offices. But this actually came from the disability community as well. We have an engineer who's blind, or sorry, apologies, she's deaf, and she reads lips. And so she would ask people when she joined calls to dim the lights behind them so that she could more easily focus on lip reading. She brought that idea to a hackathon, and out of it came Blur Background. PowerPoint Live is another really great feature that I use all the time, and it does a lot of things to make the meeting more accessible for people. For example, if I just share my screen and show my slides, a screen reader can't read my slides. But if I use PowerPoint Live, a screen reader can read my slides. I can also turn on things like high contrast if I'm using PowerPoint Live, and I can turn it on just for myself. And it also gives meeting participants the ability to scroll through the slides. So if someone missed something on a previous slide, they can go back and review that slide and get caught up. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Copilot because we've got a great session at 2 o'clock to talk specifically about Copilot for accessibility, but I did want to give you just a little bit of a teaser to encourage you to attend that session this afternoon. And I'll give you a little context as I jump in here. I sit on the central accessibility team here at Microsoft, and many of us have disabilities, and we were given very early access to Copilot to test across 3 different things. 1, the usability of the interface itself. 2, the data models. Are they representative of the voice of disability? And 3, the bias. Are we training bias out of the models? For example, if I prompt Copilot with, I have a mobility disability, what accessibility features can I use? It has to know what a mobility disability is and what features are available to support me. That's the representation of disability that we need in the models. But it should not respond with, I'm sorry you have a disability. That's the bias we're trying to train out. And along the way, we started documenting our use cases for how we leverage Copilot. And I'll give you just a few examples. I've got a colleague who is autistic who would tell you that his emails can come across as a little bit blunt or harsh. And so he uses Copilot in Outlook to adjust the tone of his emails. Another colleague who's autistic would say that she doesn't always know when to jump in with questions during a Teams call. So she'll ask Copilot when it's appropriate to ask a question. Our disability policy advisor here at Microsoft is dyslexic, and as you can imagine, she reads a lot of long policy documents. And so she'll use Copilot to summarize and simplify the language of those documents. I mentioned my mobility disability. If I'm on a Teams call, I can't take notes because I can't type on a traditional keyboard, and I can't use speech to text when I'm in a meeting because I've got my microphone on. And so trying to remember everything that happened in meetings throughout the day and find time during my day to dictate those meetings was incredibly stressful and time consuming. Teams meeting recap has been an absolute game changer for me. I've got a colleague who's blind who would tell you that for the first time in his career, he's able to create beautiful professional PowerPoint presentations without a sighted assistant. That's the power of Copilot. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit because while productivity tools are incredibly important, I think it's equally important to understand how to build accessible content. Going back to that 75% of disabilities are non-apparent number, we're working with colleagues, customers, constituents every day who have disabilities that we're not aware of. So it should fall to all of us to build accessible content. And so I'm going to give you just a few tips on how to build accessible content and then share with you a new tool that we've rolled out recently to help you check for accessibility when you're creating content. We'll start with alt text. Alt text is a description of an image. So if I'm using a screen reader because I'm blind or have low vision, if there's an image that doesn't have that alt text, I don't know what that image is. So we encourage you to add alt text to any image you drop into a presentation, an email, a Word document. And in PowerPoint and Word, when you drop an image in, it will use AI to automatically create that alt text, but we do encourage you to go test it and check it out because it's not perfect. And just a few tips for alt text. Keep it concise. Just include anything that's relevant in that image. If you've got just a circle on a PowerPoint presentation for aesthetics, you can mark that as decorative. You only need to add text to images when the image is relevant or conveys meaning. And one little tip that I use that I learned from my colleague who's blind, who does this in reverse. If someone sends her an image and it doesn't have alt text, she drops it into Copilot chat and asks chat to describe the image, and it gives her a really great description. I do that in reverse now to create my alt text. So I'll just drop an image in, get the alt text, maybe make it a little bit more concise, and that's what I use to describe my images. Color contrast is the most common accessibility issue that we see. And what I mean by that is an example is if you put yellow font on a white background, you don't have enough contrast to make it easily readable, which makes it very difficult for someone with low vision or someone who's neurodivergent. And in PowerPoint and Word, when you select your font color, you've got the option to toggle on high contrast only so that you are sure to have that right contrast. Captions and transcriptions are very important, and I've got an example on the screen here from the TED website because I think they do a great job of providing closed captions for all of their audio content, and they also offer a transcript option. So if you prefer to read the transcript, you've always got that option. So it's great to provide people with different ways to consume that content. Conveying information with color is a tricky one. So many people have color blindness that we're not aware of. So if we are putting images or indicating information with just color alone, we're excluding people who have color blindness. And I've got an example here from Teams. In Teams, you'll see if someone is showing busy because they've got a red circle. If they are in Do Not Disturb, it's a red circle with a line through it. And if they're available, it's a green circle with a check mark. And so in addition to just the red and green indicators, we've got the dash and the check mark to provide another indicator of the person's status. So we're not relying on just red and green. So it's important to add things like icons, text, or patterns in addition to color to convey information. Accessible links. How many of you have seen a website or a page that says click here? We all do that. But if you're a screen reader user, it's very difficult because you don't know where here is and you don't know where you're being directed to. So I encourage you to describe the link destination when you're creating a hyperlink. So on the screen, I'm showing a snippet where the hyperlink is learn more about accessibility at Microsoft. That entire sentence is the hyperlink. So it's clear where I'm directing the user to. And then here's a fun one with emojis and GIFs. And I've always wondered whose job it is to create emojis. And a few weeks ago, I actually met someone at Microsoft whose job is to create emojis. He might be the only person at Microsoft that has a job that's more fun than mine. But emojis are accessible by design. So a screen reader can read out and describe an emoji, for example, a hand pointing to the right or a smiley face. If you're adding GIFs in, those are not necessarily accessible by design because they don't have that alt text. So just like an image, if you add a GIF into something, please do add the alt text to go along with it. And then, as I mentioned, we have recently rolled out a tool called Accessibility Assistant. Now, historically, our legacy tool is called Accessibility Checker. You all have that in your products today. So when you're creating content, you can go into your review menu option, and then you can select Run Accessibility Checker. And it's going to let you know any accessibility issues you have. Another indicator is at the bottom of your PowerPoint or your Word application, you'll see Accessibility Investigate. And if you see that at the bottom, click on it and it will open up Accessibility Checker for you. If you have no issues, it's going to say Accessibility Good to Go. But recently, we added Accessibility Assistant, and it's still in preview, so it may not be in your tenant yet. And it's also one you have to toggle on. So if you go into your accessibility settings in your applications, you'll see the option to toggle it on. So I encourage you to do so. And the way this works is similar to how spell check works today, in that it will give you instant feedback if you introduce an accessibility issue. So today, if you misspell a word, you get that angry red squiggly line underneath your word. Now, with Accessibility Assistant, if you introduce, in this example, a color contrast issue, it's going to pop up an accessibility icon. When you click on that icon in this example, it's going to say you've got a low contrast issue. It's going to explain what that means and how to correct it. And in the case of a color contrast issue, it will pop up a complementary high contrast color palette for you to select a different color. You can select the color, it gets applied to your font, and it immediately resolves that accessibility issue for you. If you're responsible for SharePoints within your organization, we've also added Accessibility Assistant into SharePoint. So on the right side of your screen, under your Tools menu, you'll see an accessibility icon. And when you click on it, it's going to let you know what accessibility issues you have on your SharePoint page. And it's going to look for things like your page structure, missing alternative text, blank links, tables that are missing headers, and color contrast. So again, really, really important for all of us to create accessible content as we're sending it out to our colleagues, constituents, customers. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about accessibility resources that you have available. Last year, we introduced a generative AI chatbot called Ask Microsoft Accessibility. And it will answer any question that you have about the accessibility features in our products. You also have a free support service called the Disability Answer Desk. This is our consumer support service, or our Enterprise Disability Answer Desk, or EDAD, which is just that, our enterprise support service. So if you've got a question about an accessibility feature, or if you found an issue with an accessibility feature in our products, you can reach out to our Enterprise Disability Answer Desk. And this can include things like third-party assistive technology. So if you're using a screen reader that's not working well with some of our products, we can support those questions as well because we've got those relationships with the third-party AT providers. So if you're at home this weekend playing with your Xbox game controller, your adaptive Xbox game controller, and it's not working well, you can reach out to DAD. If you're at work and experiencing an issue, please reach out to EDAD. And we also have lots of accessibility training options available for you. And we revamped both of these last year. Accessibility 101 is a training that's mandatory for every single employee at Microsoft. So we all, over 200,000 of us, have taken Accessibility 101, and we've made this available as well out on YouTube. It's about a 20-minute training that I think you'll find really useful. And then to expand on that, you can go to our Accessibility Fundamentals training. And again, these are both free trainings, but Accessibility Fundamentals is available out on our Learn site. And it's 6 modules that starts with Accessibility 101 and goes all the way through to how do I build an accessible experience leveraging AI. And we also have it available via a SCORM package that you can upload right into your own learning management system. And so we'll make all these links available for you. And with that, I will wrap up because I think I'm between you and lunch. So thank you so much for the opportunity to come talk with you about accessibility within the Microsoft 365 products. And please come to the Copilot session this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Lori.